This is Ray Varner, class of 2010, on July 21st, 2011, at Chesapeake, Virginia, at the home of Rebecca Burcher Jones, class of 76. 77, I apologize. And who were you known when you were at Randolph-Macon?
I was known as Becky.
Okay, Becky Jones?
Becky Burcher.
Becky Burcher. So I should have got that before, but... All right, and this is the Living Legacies Oral History Program, a Women of Randolph-Macon Oral History Program. And also with us in the room today are Sarah Hendricks and Claire Stevens from the Development Office. Hello, Becky.
Hi. How are you?
Good. So first question's easy. Where did you grow up, and maybe where did you went to high school? Or?
I grew up in Newport News, Virginia, and I went to Menchville High School, graduated in the spring of 1973, and have always lived in Virginia with the exception of 2 years early on in my life. My father was worked for the Newport News shipyard, and we were one of about 100 families in the mid to late 50s that were sent to Idaho Falls, Idaho, where the first nuclear reactor was built for a submarine. And of course it was built on a desert in case there was any problem. So other than that small stint in Idaho, I've lived all my life in Virginia.
So how did you hear about Randolph-Macon College?
Well, when I was a senior in high school, there were several students in my high school class who were planning to go to Randolph-Macon. One of them, do you need to stop?
Actually, you can just answer. How did you first hear about the college?
There were several students in my high school class who were planning to attend. One was the valedictorian, Mark Jobe, and then the guy who was third in our class, Earl Gaughan, was going to Randolph-Macon. There was another student, George Barrow. He was a good friend of mine. We had a number of classes together in high school. He was the editor of the yearbook, and I was the editor of the newspaper in our high school class. And then we both went on to Randolph-Macon and later held those same two positions at Randolph-Macon at the same time. So I knew those three guys were going to Randolph-Macon, and I had a lot of respect for them and their intellect. And even though initially I didn't consider Randolph-Macon myself, I knew that they were thinking about going to the school. And I had applied to UVA and Mary Washington, and I wasn't. I didn't really know where I wanted to go. I thought I wanted to go to UVA because most of my high school friends were going there, and it was very competitive to get into UVA, and they had a rolling admission. And being shy, timid kid that I was, I didn't apply to the very end, and I think I like to think I could have gotten in, but I applied at the very end and I didn't get in, and I was just heartbroken. And it was already it was March or April of 19. Well, I remember that there were sit-ins. I don't remember myself participating in any of the sit-ins, but remember that being a very hot topic on campus. And remember that the president that we had at the time, Luther White, being a very rigid, firm, inflexible sort of person, must have felt that it was his duty to keep those girls virtuous and keep them on the straight and narrow. And so it was. I just remember being an interesting time because it was such an important topic to so many students, and it was a difficult time for the college administration to begin to relax and realize that just like in high school or apartment complexes or neighborhoods, that males and females are going to figure out how to live together and come and go peacefully. I think it was just beyond the administration's comprehension at that point that it could happen naturally. And I think that there was a feeling on the part of the administration that they were responsible to these girls' parents, and they would have to answer to these parents if, say, for example, one of these girls got pregnant. And I don't think they wanted to entertain that idea. So to keep that from happening, at least in their minds, there were going to be strict visitation rules.
You said earlier, you mentioned earlier that I guess you wanted to be a writer. So did you have English as a major when you came in?
I planned from the very beginning to be an English major, and had Richie Watson as my freshman English teacher, and then later had him for many other upper-level English classes, and still remain a friend of his today. Went to his retirement party a year or two ago. And he and I still laugh because I had taken AP English in high school, and I had also taken an advanced composition class, and so I fancied myself as a pretty good writer. And so I went and wrote my first paper for Richie, and he gave me a C. And I was so insulted. And so I made an appointment with him and went to talk to him. So anyway, we still laugh now about how insulted I was over that first C. But eventually, my writing, I learned how to write college papers, and ultimately achieved A's on my papers from Richie. So.
Was he your advisor?
He was also my advisor, right? Yeah, and he was young, newly married himself at the time, and maybe had only been at Randolph-Macon one or two years. Dow Wooten was the chairman of the department, and actually, I was the first student that ever had an internship during January colloquy. And that internship, I mean, I know they're very common now, and students go and work in career fields that they might want to pursue, but back in the mid-'70s, that wasn't something that was so common. But I knew that I wanted to be a newspaper reporter, and so I had gotten to be friends with Jay Pace, who was the editor of the Herald-Progress, and Jay graduated from Randolph-Macon in 1967. And so my senior year, I pitched the idea to Jay that I would do an internship working as a reporter at the Herald-Progress during January. And he was open to the idea. Of course, I had come to know him because I had edited the Yellow Jacket, and so was frequently in the Herald-Progress offices. So I knew Jay that way. And I had a part-time job just doing clerical kinds of things my senior year at the Herald Progress. So that fall, talked to him about doing an internship, and he was willing to give it a try, and so he and Dal Wooten and I put our heads together and came up with a proposal. And Dal Wooten and I went to the curriculum committee and upstairs in Peel Hall and presented it, and it was accepted. And so I have the distinction of having done the first colloquy internship, and that was as a reporter at the Herald Progress. So, and then after that spring, Jay offered me a job as a reporter at the Herald Progress, but I had also worked in at the Daily Press in Newport News as a summer intern. The summers between my sophomore and junior year and my junior and my senior year, and so I had experience at that newspaper. And actually, when I went to college the beginning of my senior year, I already knew that coming out in May, if I wanted it, I had a reporting job at the Daily Press. So that whole senior year, I knew that I had a job somewhere. And so I actually had the choice between working at the Herald Progress or working at the Daily Press, and chose working at the Daily Press, going back to my hometown, even though I wasn't that keen on going back to my hometown. But the money was better. I think it was like the difference between $6,000 a year and $7,500 a year in salary before taxes. So, I went for the bigger bucks.
So, did you have any other classes outside of your major that you felt were crucial in your development, or any professors that really stood out for you outside of English?
I remember taking a colloquy class with Dr. Pannell. He taught philosophy, and I remember that being something that really challenged me in my thinking. We wrote a lot in that class, and that probably was why it appealed to me. Can't recall the title of the colloquy at the time, but it was my junior year, and I remember just whatever philosophical topics we were asked to think about and write about, I remember being challenged and enjoying that. And Dr. Pannell was a fixture on campus, as was his wife. They had been there many, many years, and you often saw them together. And students of his were equally as fond of her as they were of him. Also remember Schuyler Miller. He taught geology, and for those students who were not the science-oriented ones, the English major types tended to take geology and astronomy. Is that still the way it is?
No, but I feel like the majority of the women that we've interviewed had the same classes. So.
And George Barrow and I took geology together, and we were lab partners. And Schuyler Miller, really, I remember taking the class thinking, okay, just have to get through this. But he really had a way of making you appreciate geology and fall in love with rocks, and I did. And I remember enjoying the class quite a lot, and feeling quite proud of the A that I earned in his class, because he taught maybe chemistry classes, I can't recall.
He was a chemistry professor.
And he was known for being a challenging professor. And so even though it wasn't chemistry from him, and I'm sure I wouldn't have made an A in chemistry from him, but I remember being proud of getting a good grade from him.
Do you remember what Barrow got?
Oh, he got an A too.
Oh.
Yeah, he got an A. George was a good student. In fact, George was Phi Beta Kappa. So.
So was Ray.
Okay.
I always brag about that.
I looking back, I've thought, gosh, why didn't I push myself harder? Because I think I could have been Phi Beta Kappa, but I was interested in. I was so nervous about how I would fare that I didn't set a goal like that. But I was in ODK, and I was proud of being in ODK because that blended not only academics, but it included your leadership skills too. So I was proud of being selected for that.
So you mentioned that you left to take the job. You didn't take the job with the Herald Progress. So how long did you stay there? What did you do after that?
I went to work at the Daily Press as a feature writer, and I just stayed there 1 year. I lived in Williamsburg and roomed with another English major from Randolph-Macon, Betsy Lewis, who's Betsy McNeil now. She was going to the graduate English program at William & Mary, and so we had an apartment together in Williamsburg. And it was a difficult transition to go from college, where there were all kinds of people your age and things to do, and there were always friends, and suddenly I was in this work environment with it was an all-female features department, and these women were 35 and 45 and married and children, and it was everyone went to lunch together at the same time. They sat in the same chair around the same table every day, and they talked about what they had for dinner the night before. And I wasn't married, and I didn't have children, and I just thought, oh my God, I found it just very stifling, and really was very unhappy there. I thought, oh my gosh, so this is life? And so anyway, I took a bold step, and I quit after 1 year, and Betsy was getting married. I continued to room with her up until the time she got married, and I was looking for a job during that time, and I went to a smaller newspaper, the Potomac News, in the big metropolis of Dumfries, Virginia. And I lived in a suburb, Triangle, in a basement apartment. It was a pretty gloomy existence, and I was making $7,900 a year before taxes, and I covered the school beat for Prince William County. But it was a younger staff, more young people, and actually it was more fun, a more energizing place to work. And I worked there, I guess, 3 years, and then through a Randolph-Macon connection, went to work for the Virginian Pilot in Norfolk. Dennis Hardig, who had graduated around the same time, late 60s. He graduated in 71. But he had been a friend of Jay Pace's, and so I had met Dennis through Jay. And Dennis was a city editor at the Virginian Pilot. And so cultivated a friendship with him, and over the years kept calling him, and eventually he called me to tell me there was an opening, and I went, interviewed, and got the position. Later he told me it was one of the things that had impressed him was my persistence, that I kept calling him through the years. And fortunately, Dennis was a terrible speller, because I wrote a thank you note, because the newspaper had put me up for a night to come down for the interview. And so I had written a thank you note, and I had thanked them for the accommodations, ACCOMMODATIONS, 2 M's and 2 C's. Well, I only put 1 M in it, and I meant to look it up before I finished my thank you note, and I guess forgot and didn't, and mailed it off. And I remember waking up bolt upright in bed and thinking, oh no, I forgot to check the spelling. And I had a copy of my rough draft of my note, and I got up out of bed and I went and looked it up, and I had misspelled it. And I was like, okay, I'll never get this job now. And so was surprised when I did, and was like, wow, I don't know how they hired me and I misspelled a word. I was looking to be a reporter there. Anyway, it wasn't long after starting to work there that I learned that Dennis was a terrible speller. And hardly any time in his newsroom, I heard him yell out. He had an office with a glass window, and he was at his typewriter and yelled out into the newsroom, "How do you spell accommodate?" And I was like, oh, so that's how I got the job. He didn't know how to spell it. Whew. So anyway, I worked at the Virginian Pilot for close to 4 years. And by that time, I had been a newspaper reporter for 7 years. And news reporting was hard in that it was a lot of long hours. It was very competitive. If you wanted to excel in it, you had to keep pushing to the next level, next larger paper. And I wasn't really sure. By that time, I was like about 28, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to continue work being the only thing that I did in life. And so I started thinking, how can I take these writing skills that I have and turn them into some other career? So I started looking into corporate communications, and so from there, just through connections, found out about a job at Norfolk Southern Corp, and so got the job there and worked for 16 years in corporate communications for Norfolk Southern. Did all sorts of writing there, employee communications, customer communications, financial communications, and ultimately the last few years that I was there, I guess the last 7 years, I wrote the annual report for the company. So I'm one of those few people that I think can say I've always made a living writing, and most people aspire to being a writer, but don't find it too easy to put food on the table doing that. But currently, I don't work full time. But since I left Norfolk Southern in 2000, I left voluntarily. I had recently gotten married, and it was the first opportunity in my life where I could entertain the idea of doing something other than working full-time and supporting myself. And so I quit working full-time just to kind of pursue what else might come along. And I continued to do freelance writing at that point for the Virginian Pilot. I had maintained friendships with people that I had known there, and so when they found out that I was no longer working at Norfolk Southern, I was called and asked if I wanted to do freelance work. So since 2000, have been doing freelance work, have had feature articles, and then also for about 5 years did a food column, and since I guess about 2003, so 7 years or so, 7 or 8 years now, I have been writing a gardening column that comes out each month. Pick my own topic. It's actually a writer's dream because I select my own topic, I take my own pictures, I do all of it by electronically. I've been writing for so long, for so many years, that actually my copy doesn't get edited very much, which as a writer is a nice thing. I mean, it's not that everything I write is perfect and nothing can be improved on, but it's nice to have a relationship with an editor who has confidence. She knows that I'm not going to miss the mark, and I have a lot of freedom to pick my topic. And anybody who has ever aspired to being a writer will tell you that that's like your ideal job, to be able to do something like that. Now, they don't pay me a whole lot, and I certainly couldn't support myself on what they pay me, but I love having my hand in writing and keeping my skills sharp, and so I do it for the pleasure.
So how have you it's all right. I'm sure it's really interesting that you started out college knowing that you wanted to write. I think you're one of the very few people that come into college and then all the way through. Even until now, you're still doing what you came in as a freshman and you wanted to do. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But
most people are not that lucky. And most people also are not so lucky, especially not in today's world, to enter college their senior year already knowing that you've got a job. So I didn't worry my whole senior year because I knew I had that fallback job at the Daily Press.
So how did you stay in contact with the college over the years?
Well, let's see. I went back and forth to homecoming events the first few years out of college. So I still, felt a connection to the school, and it probably wasn't until maybe 5 years or so after. As long as I still knew students there, I still felt a kinship and a familiarity, and maybe it wasn't until probably 10 years or so later that then it began to feel like a little bit of a different place. But I stayed in touch with friends, and I had a number of friends that were in the Richmond area, and so they were in touch with the school. And it always, I always enjoyed going back to campus, and occasionally would meet a friend maybe from the Northern Virginia area, and we would get together on campus at the same time. And I stayed in touch with Richie Watson, certainly not monthly or real frequently, but always in touch with him, and would see Sandy Bond from time to time, and she would always have talked to Richie, and so there were connections. So through people, I guess I would say, and I always felt a real sense of pride at having been part of the first class of women. And then I was asked by Doug Crookshanks if I would be on the Board of Associates. And that was probably in the late 80s. And there were only about 5 women, I guess, on the Board of Associates at that time. And maybe you should.
Oh, sorry.
One of the things I remember from fall of my freshman year, going to the Hampton-Sydney Randolph-Macon football game, and it was played at Randolph-Macon that year, and so of course Hampton-Sydney, which is still all male, and I cannot imagine how they've managed to stay that way, but those boys brought a big banner that they put up in front of the visitor seating in gigantic letters that said, "Better dead than co-ed." So of course they were poking fun at Randolph-Macon for having gone to begun to accept women. And another thing that I remember, goodness, and this went on the entire time I was a student at Randolph-Macon, and even after I graduated, I would say that I was going, or that I graduated from Randolph-Macon, and the automatic follow-up question was, "Oh, you mean the men's college?"
Oh, God.
So it took a long time before Randolph-Macon became just Randolph-Macon, not Randolph-Macon, the men's school. So, and also one other thing I remember, this was a little bit of reverse discrimination, I suppose. There was an older woman that worked in the dining room, especially the morning shifts, and her name was Miss Emily, and she was especially fond of those male students, and so I don't think that she was happy to see girls coming to school there, and so especially on the weekends, she loved to give the boys exactly what they wanted, and extra eggs and more bacon, and you come right up here, Miss Emily will fix you up, and that sort of thing. And she was not too friendly to the female students.
A little territorial.
Yes, I think she thought of them as her boys, and she didn't especially like those girls moving in and sharing the space with her boys. So,
could you tell anyone else that they were still adjusting? I mean, the faculty, because of course it's my understanding that some of the faculty were opposed to coeducation. Was it ever obvious to you who those might have been, or that there were even people who had opposed it?
No, I really didn't have. I wasn't aware of that. Now looking back, I can imagine that that there were people who were opposed. And I mentioned earlier that I'm friends with David Meyer, who graduated in class of '74, And not too long ago, he and his wife were visiting here, and sitting around the same table, we were talking about those early days, and he said that he wasn't sure that it was going to go co-ed, and his plan was that if it didn't, that he was going to leave the school. So just from that, I guess that comment was the first time really that I had thought about the idea that maybe there was administrative opposition to it. As a student, my understanding was there really wasn't a choice. Either the school went co-ed or the doors were going to be shut down. And so with that perspective in mind as a student, I never really entertained the idea of there being opposition.
Were there any females on the faculty? You mentioned B.J. Seymour.
B.J. Seymour.
I know they hired some in the late 70s, but did you have a female professor at all?
I had B.J. Seymour for Old and New Testament my junior year. But she is the only female professor that I remember having. There weren't any females in the English department at the time. And none in the math department, and I don't think any in the science department. Or history. I don't think there were many. BJ is probably the only one that I recall. So.
A question that I like to ask everyone, but it's not, I guess, an official question, is kind of in retrospect, looking back, is there a particular advice you would give to young women who are headed to college now? Sort of based on your own experience, things that you are glad you did, things that you wish you had done, things you wish you hadn't done, that kind of thing.
You mean any
just advice,
any female going to college?
Yeah, or actually, I mean, it's really any person
Any
going
person
to
going to
college.
college. Well, I would have to say to not take it so seriously. Because there really is so much more of your life beyond those 4 years in college. And when I entered college, I thought those 4 years were going to define the rest of my life. And so I was so serious about it. And of course now with some life experience, I can look back and see that yes, there were things that happened then that helped define who I am, but there have been so many other things beyond that that have contributed to defining who I am. And so don't get stuck on thinking that that's the only thing. And so if I had it to do over again, or if I were advising someone, I would take a more laid-back approach than what I did. I was very, very intense because I thought every single thing mattered. And I remember my high school English teacher meeting with those of us that had gone to Randolph-Macon. We'd all been in the same English class together, and we got together with her at Christmas. And I remember her saying, you guys, you're all so intense. You need to lighten up. I mean, nobody is ever going to ask you later what you got in that Shakespeare class. And I remember thinking at the time, well, even though no one may ask me what I got, it's still important what I get. And I, through life, have thought about that so many times because truly no one has ever asked what I got.
What did you get? I was going to say, we must
an A, of course. And I still have my my exam from Shakespeare, and it's in my Shakespeare book from Randolph-Macon. and it amazes me that that I was able to pass that exam, much less make an A on it. We had to identify by play, act, scene, couplets out of all these Shakespeare plays, and I just cannot imagine now how I ever did that. And I mean, the exam went on, and I just look at it now every now and then just to marvel that at one time I did know that. Yeah. And I also still have one of my final linguistics exams too, which I had Dr. Hasker, and I really loved that class and loved Dr. Hasker. Although I was afraid of him, he had such a reputation as being such a difficult professor that I had steered clear of him. And it wasn't until my senior year that I took classes from him, and then I was like, oh, why did I miss out on classes from him? Because I really, really loved him and loved linguistics, so which I think was your area. So anyway, that would be my advice to I mean, certainly take it seriously, but not look at it as the one and only defining segment in your adult life, because surely it won't be. So.
All right. If you don't have anything else to say, I guess we're done with our questions.
Okay.
So.
Just make sure Yep, I think I mentioned everything that I had on there.
Well, thanks for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. This was fun.